Back when I was a kid, there were very few players as enigmatic as the one I'll tell you about today. People called him the Emperor because he was just that imposing and strong. I remember kids in school spreading rumors about him that he once hit the bar with such force that the goal was knocked loose. He was simply a hero to each and every single one of us. Unfortunately, one disastrous event would ruin him mentally forever and send his career on the wrong path. Welcome to the life of Adriano, o Imperador. Adriano made some really poor decisions over his career, but you know what's always a good decision? Downloading FOTMob. Yep, that's the sponsor. So, if you want to make sure you're always up to date with your favorite teams, FOTMob is the best app for you. Live match scores and stats, live commentary, transfer updates, TV schedules, news, and I got all of that for over 375 competitions. So let's say you want to know how good Lionel Messi is doing. You just go and check the app, and oh, who would have guessed? He's doing amazing, of course. But really, the app looks great and it's super easy to use, and if you download it, you're also helping out the channel, which of course just makes my day that much better. So go in the description, click the first link and download the app. It's really an easy decision and I'm sure you'll be pleased with it. But for now, let's get back to the video. Like many other Brazilians, Adriano's life started in the worst way possible, in the middle of great poverty and misery. It was so poor in fact that at his first youth team they still played barefoot in the dirt. At the club, the other boys had a far less impressive nickname for him than the Emperor. They called him the Popcorn Boy because once his grandma went up to the pitch to ask him if he wanted to come up to eat some popcorn. I found this really funny. Apparently as a child his biggest dream was to get rich and buy a cool car. He actually ended up training really hard and becoming really serious about football because he thought that he had no other talents. But if he considered himself talentless, at least I'm sure he had to value his own work rate. By the age of 16 he would break into the Flamengo youth team, oddly enough playing as a left back. At the time the coaches judged him on face value and, considering his imposing frame, they thought there was no place for him outside of defense. By the next year, now playing as a striker, his strength and shocking shot power with his left foot earned him a place in the first team despite being only 17. After 24 matches, Adriano had scored 10 goals, which might not seem like much, but you have to realize how impressive he was on the pitch. Like a raging bull, he matched strength, power and speed. At 17, it was already clear that he would be one of the best in the world. Over summer he took part in the Under-20 World Cup, though he had already gotten his first match for the main team in a World Cup qualifier. With the youth team he did amazing, though he failed to score in the first match against Germany. Then he went on a goal scoring streak, getting 6 goals in just 6 matches, as Brazil eventually still managed to get knocked out by Ghana in the quarterfinals. An unfortunate end considering the form Adriano was in. Regardless, he still managed to be the tournament's second highest goal scorer, which is a pretty crazy achievement if you ask me. At the time, Ronaldo phenomenon was already dominating Europe and word started going around that Adriano would be his successor. So Inter, who had been dealing with the injury of Ronaldo himself, decided they would be the perfect team to sign Adriano, and in a way, they were right. Ronaldo, still recovering from injury, took Adriano under his wing and tried to teach him everything he had learned. How to behave on the pitch, how to deal with the fans, and according to Adriano himself, he also taught him not to spend nights at hotels with a different woman every night. Kind of a weird problem to have if you ask me. At his first training session, Materazzi could not believe his eyes. Adriano was so talented that Materazzi said he looked like an alien when he played. In one of his first matches, Inter faced Real Madrid, and when the time to hit a free kick came, Seedorf and Materazzi both approached the ball, but then the coach asked them to let Adriano take it. It was bold, they were stunned at the decision but complied. Adriano smashed it into the goal with unimaginable power, something truly out of this world. Some claim the ball hit speeds of 200 km per hour. A star was truly born that day. Everyone saw for the first time what this man was capable of. After half a season at Inter, where to be honest he was struggling a bit, he would be loaned out to Fiorentina, who were in horrendous form. Even though Adriano managed 5 goals in his first 8 matches for the club, by the end of the season he had only tasted victory once with Fiorentina. And it would come in a match against Hellas Verona, where he and Adrian Muto, who would partner up with him the following season, both scored in the dying minutes of the match. After this rather unsuccessful stint with Fiorentina, a new move would come as Inter were pursuing the signing of Fabio Cannavaro from Parma. In an effort to close the transfer, they offered them the possibility of a co-ownership deal over Adriano, which would lead him to join the club for 2 years. This coincided with the arrival of the previously mentioned Adrian Mutu. These two, despite their age, were the two players in which Parma's hopes relied the most. Over the last decade, Parma, through their millionaire sponsorships with Parmalat, had managed to become a powerhouse of Italian football, winning 4 international trophies, something that was previously out of reach for the club. But now they were being picked apart by bigger teams and being stripped of their stars. First Buffon and Thuram, and now Cannavaro and Marco Di Vaio. Much of the club's success had relied on the perfect balance of their attacking duos like Zola and Asprilla, and later Enrico Chiesa and Crespo. In a way, if you really think about it, Mutu and Adriano were perfect for this role. They were unconventional, daring, and entirely different from one another. Mutu was elegant, quick, technical, and Adriano, he was like a bulldozer. Midway through the season, they had pretty much convinced the world that they were here to take over. With 10 goals in his first 11 matches for the club, the usual shouts that Adriano was the new Ronaldo were heard everywhere, and some saying that Mutu was the new Agi soon followed. But there was one clear stain in their resume. So far, Parma had failed against the giants of Italy, with not a single win and mostly all defeats as they faced them. As good as they were, there was a clear notion that they were in a way just the best from the rest, and not the dominating force many thought they would be capable of being. In April, they met AC Milan. This would be one of the last times they would meet one of the greats this season, and this match was a statement. As the crowds occupied the stands, the rossoneri roared in all their might, but the Parma fans persisted through the match, even as it became more and more cunning and cagey. It was clear it would be the type of match defined by a single moment of beauty, of genius, and so it came. Mutu got the ball at the halfway line and just glided down the wing before sending the ball into the area where Adriano, with a drop of a shoulder, sent Maldini the wrong way before magically flicking it over Dida. It was one win, and sure it wouldn't be enough in a way. By the end of the season, Parma would still barely miss a place in the Champions League, and Mutu and Adriano would both make the podium but come behind Vieri in the top scorers lists. Still, this meant something for them. It meant they were capable of more. And the world believed their promise. Mutu would join Chelsea as he looked to prove his status as a world-class playmaker, and Adriano would only play 13 more matches for Parma before Inter paid out Parma's share and brought him back to Milan. Meanwhile, he still had time to join Brazil for his first ever international tournament, the Confederations Cup, where despite Brazil's awful run, he would score 2 out of the team's measly 3 goals in the tournament. His start back at Inter was amazing, with 5 goals in his first 5 matches, even getting 3 in 2 matches against Juventus. But then, he went on a dry streak, 6 matches with no goals, only to come back and get 7 goals in his last 7 matches, which would, in the end, add up to a pretty incredible season. It would only get better over summer as he joined Brazil in their quest for the 2004 Copa America. Brazil brought a squad that was missing most of their key players. In a way, Adriano was the biggest name present and they relied on him to be successful. In the group stage, he would be mostly quiet with the exception of their match against Costa Rica, in which Adriano got himself a hat-trick. Still, Brazil would get 2 wins and be through to the knockout stage. In the quarterfinals, Adriano got himself a brace as they defeated Mexico 4-0. With 5 goals already, this looked out to be a pretty good debut in the Copa America for Adriano. But we all know that the Copa America is defined in the last 2 matches, where the competition gets truly tough, and so they met Uruguay in the semifinals. By halftime, Brazil would be behind, and of course it would be Adriano with an opportunistic touch that would tie the match. As they went on to penalties, he did his duty and got the goal, and Brazil earned their spot in the final of the Copa America. Once there, of course they had to meet their eternal rivals Argentina. It was a tough match, with constant back and forth from both teams. By the late stages, the game would be tied at 1 goal. But then, at the 87th minute, Cesar Delgado with a cold-blooded strike put his dagger to the heart of every Brazilian, putting Argentina in front. There wasn't much hope for Brazil after that. As the final whistle got closer and closer and the final seconds started ticking, a lost ball ended up by Adriano, who in the perfect form only a natural striker could display, would get one touch on the ball and smash it on the turn, extending Brazil's lifeline. As they went into penalties, Adriano would score once again as Brazil went on to win the competition. Adriano was the top scorer with 7 goals, 4 more than any other player, and the Brazilian coach would go on record saying it was the biggest reason for their success in the tournament. Adriano's mind was in the clouds. This was the highest point of his career. He was truly a national hero. It really seemed that nothing could ruin this moment for him until he went back to Milan and the call came. Adriano's father had died from a heart attack. Back in the favela de Vila Cruzeiro, Adriano's dad was his hero, a beam of light amongst the darkness brought upon him by the crime and poverty in the area. It was a place so dangerous that for years his father lived with a bullet that got lodged in his skull as he was caught in a shootout. It meant the world to Adriano when he just couldn't deal with his passing. Zanetti was present when he got the call and he described the moment like this. I saw him in his room, he threw his phone and started screaming. You just can't imagine that kind of scream. We tried to watch over him like he was our little brother. He kept playing, he pointed to the sky when he scored. It was all for his father, but nothing was ever the same. We told him that he could be the best ever, but it was too late. We lost him to depression. At first, it seemed that Adriano was decided to play in his father's honor. He hit some of the best form any player has ever hit. He seemed possessed by the idea that he had to make him proud. Maybe it was that. Maybe it was the feeling that as long as he was inside the pitch, he was free from this living nightmare. I guess we'll never truly know, but in those first few months after, he got 21 goals in 21 consecutive matches. He was most likely the deadliest striker in the world. This form brought upon him the kind of fame he had dreamed of since he was a kid. For a fragile, broken man, this was enough turbulence to push him off his tracks. In one swift blow, he was out of reach. The second half of the season would see him only get 2 Serie A goals. Unbelievable considering the form he was in just a few months prior. One vice followed after the other. Adriano was being consumed by a bohemian world he couldn't defend himself from. The following season, he was still managing to get a few goals, though the inconsistency was evident. He would either go on a goal-scoring streak or go missing for several matches. Even as he joined an incredible Brazilian squad with Kaká, Ronaldinho and Ronaldo joining him in attack and hopes that he'd bounce back at an all-time high, it would all end in disappointment, with Adriano only managing 5 shots throughout the whole World Cup as Brazil got knocked out in the quarterfinals. By 2007, it had only gotten worse. 3 seasons after the death of his father, he was struggling to play the full 90 and barely ever scoring. He was a wreck, a shadow of his former self. For a while, Inter downplayed it, saying it was injuries who got the best of him. They truly did try to protect him, they saw the pain he was in, but later, Adriano would tell the world what had truly happened. As the pain got worse and worse, he looked towards alcohol as a way to forget his problems, to make the pain fade away. He said it himself, he was drunk all the time. He showed up for training drunk, he showed up so they could help him, but in a way, he realized the only way to save himself was to run away, and honestly, at this point there's no shame in that. His behavior had changed and that had caused a rift between him and the staff, so in a last effort, he was sent to Brazil on unpaid leave for the second time in a year. There, he tried to live a normal life away from the bohemian lifestyle he had created for himself in Milan. He got permission to train with São Paulo so he could keep himself in shape, and the rumors started. Some said he'd be back to play with Inter, some said he'd soon join São Paulo for good. They even said Man City had their future set on getting the fading star back to top form. There was a lot of back and forth, but eventually Inter loaned him out to São Paulo at his request so he could take part in the Copa Libertadores. In a way, there was a bit of hope that this move, though temporary, could get him back to what he had been before. This move to Brazil was a great way of getting sort of a new start to his career. For the first few matches he struggled a bit, but once he picked up the pace he got 10 goals in 13 matches. He was especially efficient in the Copa Libertadores. You could see that he was plotting a takeover, but unfortunately, even though he managed to score in both legs against Fluminense, they would knock out São Paulo out of the competition in the quarterfinals. At a certain point there might have been some belief that Adriano would be able to carry São Paulo to the final, but wherever that was, it was now gone. And Adriano's loan wouldn't end in good terms either. At a certain point Adriano seemed fed up with the squad and ended up leaving training early, which led the board to fine him, creating a tense environment for the next few months. Once he left, the coach was even quoted saying that it was for the best that he was now gone. His form back in Milan wasn't awful, but it certainly wasn't up to the bar he had set for himself. At this point his drinking hadn't stopped and he was still displaying a significant lack of fitness. This of course didn't please anyone over at Inter Milan, and by March Adriano was completely fed up with his life in Italy. So once he joined the Brazil national team for the World Cup qualifiers, he quite simply just refused to come back to Europe. He told the newspapers that he had no pleasure in playing football anymore and that he had to rethink his career. The Inter board just took this as their escape route and agreed to finalize the contract. At this point you know what had to be done. It's really just a classic. The superstar that seems down on his luck, rethinking whether he should even continue, goes back to his home country, and of course he joins his first ever club. And so Adriano packed his bags and joined Flamengo once again. And of course, as always, as much as this might be considered a cliché, Adriano went back to great form, getting 19 goals in the Brazilian Championship, including a hat-trick against second-place Internacional. And he not only claimed the title with Flamengo, but also the top scorer award. The following year, he had a great start in the regional championship, getting 11 goals in 10 matches, as well as 4 goals in the early stages of the Copa Libertadores, and even an hat-trick in the famous Fla-Flu derby, a match between Flamengo and Fluminense, just in case you were wondering where the name came from. I mean, it sounds really peculiar, you gotta give them that. But this was all cut short with a strange twist. With a new offer to play with AS Roma, Adriano moved back to Italy. This move might have excited some fans. After all, the Emperor himself was moving to Rome, and it might make it seem like he was fully recovered and ready to take over Europe once again, but trust me, that was really just not the case. Over his time at Flamengo, he had run-ins with the club's officials, the press, and even the police. It was not the right time to move to Italy whatsoever, and very soon that would be proven. Only 7 months after his arrival, Adriano's contract was terminated. He had amassed 8 matches for the club and no goals. At this point it was more than clear. The Emperor had fallen, and he was on the run. He would join Corinthians for 2 years but still only managed 7 matches over that time, though it should be noted that he managed to get himself the Copa Libertadores title, though he was only present in 1 single match as an unused substitute. Not that it is much of an achievement, but well, I guess it is something. It would be released for what they referred to as simply lack of interests. Then he'd once again go back to Flamengo. He'd be put into psychological care, physical conditioning. The club seriously wanted to help him, but he kept not showing up, and he'd be released as he missed another training session after publicly promising the fans it wouldn't happen again. It signed 2 more deals before officially calling it quits, one with Atlético Paranaense, where he'd last 2 months, and one with Miami United, where he'd play 1 single match. Adriano's life after retiring has been the target of a lot of media coverage, not exactly for its flashiness, but for how mysterious it is. There are many conflicting reports. Some say he blew through his money in a couple of years and was forced to move back to the favela, where he joined a local gang called Comando Vermelho. He's been spotted throwing gang signs and even displaying a gold-plated AK-47, but all of this sounds strange considering that his evidence that he has recently sold one of his mansions for 1.3 million euros and is residing full-time in a luxurious Rio de Janeiro resort that costs him 12,000 euros a month. It's easy to guess from all of this that Adriano's life hasn't gotten back in track, and it isn't en route to get there anytime soon. We can only hope that he'll get his head straight. As hard as it might be to admit, Adriano got plenty of chances. Honestly, I feel like there's no way to know how much the death of his father impacted his career. It could have been the make or break it moment, or it could have simply acted as a catalyst to the impending doom Adriano would face thanks to his obsession for the more bohemian of lifestyles. Just going back and taking a look at Adrian Mutu, who formed with Adriano just another of the beautiful striker partnerships we saw at Parma over the years. Mutu ended up leaving Parma and going on to join Chelsea, as I mentioned, but what I left for later is that, in a similar way, Mutu also allowed himself to stray from the right path. In London he got himself a brand new cocaine addiction, which Jose Mourinho would of course not be too fond of. Eventually, he'd be banned and his career would derail. From there on, every time he seemed to be in good form, a new scandal would just come up. Maybe that was why they played so well together. They were two tortured souls, but they complemented each other and their bond made them special. At his prime, Adriano was an expertly arranged mix of some of the greatest features a striker could ever hope for. His shocking shot power easily trumped all of his other features in the hunt for the spotlight, but Adriano was fast, had shockingly precise footwork and an incredibly imposing physique, but he also had a poor work rate in training, lack of discipline, he always struggled with injuries and above all, his personal life. At first he might have looked like the perfect package, but once you hear this out, it's obvious that he was bound to fail. I gave a lot of thinking to whether I should place Adriano in the ranking. His name is clearly iconic enough to get a spot, but honestly, taking into account all that has happened to him, I just think that it'd be a disservice to whatever is left of his legacy. Taking into account his inconsistency, lack of longevity, lack of professionalism, he would end up with an embarrassingly low score, and I just really don't see why that would be worth doing. So this was Adriano's career in a video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. It truly helps the channel so much. Please, it's really, you just have to click a button. I know it means something and it's not literally just that, but it really helps the channel so much. If you could do that, just please do. And yeah, I guess that's it. See you next week. Bye.